I want to welcome you all to Clinical Science Research Club once again with Oluwadamilare Henry Ayodele, Junior Research Officer, Intercountry Center for Oral Health for Africa, ICO. He is a dedicated research professional with nearly a decade of experience in public health, project management, and research methodology. Currently, he works as a Junior Research Officer at the Intercountry Center for Oral Health, ICO, for Africa, where he plays a key role in designing and executing research projects aimed at improving oral health outcomes across Africa. His commitment to professional development is reflected in numerous certifications in global health research, monitoring and evaluation, and leadership, earned from prestigious institutions such as the University of Washington, USA, and Savicon, Nigeria. As one of the facilitators for research methodology classes, Oluwadamilare is passionate about advancing knowledge and supporting the adoption of evidence-based practices in public health. His academic journey is complemented by his ongoing pursuit of a master's in field epidemiology at the University of Jos, Nigeria, where he continues to strengthen his research and data analysis capabilities. Beyond his professional and academic work, he has demonstrated a strong commitment to community development. During the COVID-19 pandemic, he developed a personal development training program which has successfully graduated over 50 young people, helping them gain critical life skills. Oluwadamilare's extensive experience, dedications to professional growth, and passion for community engagement make him a valuable resource for advancing public health knowledge and practices. So, with this introduction, I would want to hand over the mic to our guest speaker in person of Oluwadamilare. Can you please use your reactions to welcome our speaker for today? Sir, the floor is yours, and welcome to today's session. We're glad to have you, sir.
Thank you so much, sir. And I'm grateful for the ovation you guys are pouring in. My name is Oluwadamilare Ayodele Henry, right? And tonight we'll be considering research hypothesis and research approaches. Again, it's important that we give credit to whom it's due. Dr. Taiwolani is not just our director at the Intercountry Center for Africa, but he is our mentor. He is the one who deemed it fit to pour out this knowledge to us, and he keeps doing that. Yes, he keeps doing that because I want you to know that he keeps reviewing his slides. He's one person that we know that is given to knowledge. So as he keeps revisiting the slides, he keeps updating them. He also keeps updating us as well. So it's just what it is. We are standing on his shoulders, and what you're seeing is an adaptation of his work. So the objective, straight to the point, we have a very ambitious goal tonight. Let's see how far we can come. Right. At the end of this presentation tonight, it's my hope that you will know what hypotheses are, research hypotheses, and what research approaches are, and that you'll be able to develop research hypotheses, and you would understand its place in research, or what importance is research hypothesis. Then you also understand the different types of research hypotheses and various approaches in research. Then we're going to compare and contrast um, between quantitative and qualitative. Then we'll look at how do you go about choosing the right research approach, right? I know that this may not be totally new to you, but I want you to, like they would say, if you are going to learn, you need to be given over to, you need to ensure that you're onboarding and onboard your mind, right? So that what you know before would not stand in the way of what you can now know, right? So let's move. Recall that when we started, recall the definition of research that we decided to adopt and stick with, which is research being a systematic investigation designed to discover and contribute to a body of generalizable knowledge. And because of the nature of research, it is important that we follow it in a stepwise manner. we've gone through the first and second one. That's why you have covered in front. We've covered formulating the research title and question. We've covered literature review. That's what we did the last time we met. So if you're on this platform and you've not gone through these two classes, you will do yourself a whole lot of good to catch up. Thank God the meetings are recorded, the sessions are recorded, so that this would properly situate in the right context, right? It's not disjointed. I want you to understand that it is not disjointed. It is if you're going to do research and do it right, the way it ought to be done, you need to follow the stepwise approach. You need to ensure that you don't skip any part of the step. If not, whatever you have at the end of the day cannot be called research, because research is both systematic and scientific. And what that means is that it doesn't give room for it's objective, it's not subjective. It doesn't give room for how you feel, how you think, right? It's there is a methodology, there's an approach, and it is important that we follow it stepwise like that. All right, so tonight let's get into the crux of the matter. We're talking about research hypothesis and research approach. So under research hypothesis, I want you to know that, and I think you would agree with me that as researchers, we don't start out on a journey aimlessly. There is a reason why you are embarking on that research project, or there is a reason why you will be embarking on that research project, right? And that's where research hypothesis um, finds its place. Researchers do not just carry out their work, their project without any aim, without any expectation, right? If you see anybody doing that, that person is not doing any research. Every research problem is undertaken with the aim, right, to arrive at certain outcome. There is always an expected end. There is always an expected goal, right? It's these expectations that form our hypothesis. So research hypotheses are just scientifically reasonable predictions. Um, I think someone unmuted. Is there something I'm doing wrong? Hello, are you still there? Can you hear me?
That means I can hear you. Hello, I can hear you.
Okay,
Yes, yes,
thank
sir,
you.
we can hear
I
you.
think somebody unmuted and I felt maybe the person wanted to say something. Okay, okay. Okay, so research hypotheses are scientifically reasonable predictions, right? And some persons will call it an educated guess. It's not just a random guess. Anybody can guess. An unlearned, untrained person can just make a guess, right? But then that doesn't make it an hypothesis. It must be reasonable. It must be like it's stated there on the slide. It must be an educated guess. It must be an informed guess. That's what educated does mean. An informed guess. And why we are saying it must be informed is because thank God you a bulk of you were around last time. We talked about literature review. So it is from your diligent search that will inform what your guess would be all about. You can't be working, say for example, you're doing something on smoking and lung cancer, and your guess is you're making guesses around oral manifestation of say HIV and AIDS. They don't go together, even though you could make a guess from that train of thought, but then it doesn't follow with what you're trying to do. You're working on smoking and lung cancer. That's why some persons call it an informed or educated guess, right? So for a working definition, here is one. A research hypothesis is a specific, and I need you to note the word colored in red, is a specific, is a clear and a testable proposition, or what you might call predictive statement. Again, it's still you're guessing. It's not an affirmative statement yet, because you are going to be working, it's your outcome, it's your goal that you'll be working towards, right? So it should be clear, it should be specific, and it should be testable, right? About the possible outcome of. Okay, somebody just sent in a message in the chat box. Please
So,
confirm that what
so
this
I think
person
it's
is
his network.
saying. I need one or two. Okay, go ahead, sir.
So I
Okay,
I
think
can
okay.
see
it's
your
I
own.
wanted to be
yes,
sure.
yeah.
I can see your.
Okay, okay. All right. Thank you so much, Mr. Marky. Thank you, Mr. Presenter. Okay, all right. So let's go. Like I was saying, research hypotheses must be clear, must be specific, must be testable, right? They are just propositions, they are predictive statements about the possible outcome of the research work you're about to embark on based on a particular property or variable in the population of interest. All of these things you would understand as we move along. But then it's important you note these three words: specific, clear, and testable. These are parts of the characteristics of hypothesis. It sort of give your research endeavor, there's this enthusiasm that is built up on your inside if you're embarking on a research project, knowing fully well that, okay, these are the things, these are the possible outcomes of this research work I have engaged in. And you'll be looking out to check if you're going to reject it or you fail to reject it. Like I said, all of these things you understand as we move on. Now, in terms of selecting a statistical test, now I'm introducing another concept now, statistical test. You can see how that, aside from the fact that your research hypothesis dictates the direction or flow of your research work, it also has something to do with the choice of statistical tests you will be using in your research work. So, meaning if it is not clear, if it is not specific, if it is not testable, then it would affect the choice of an appropriate statistical test that you will be using. Right. So in terms of selecting a statistical test, the most important question is what is the main study hypothesis? What are your hypotheses? Right. Those are it's your hypothesis that would also, um, as it were, help you select the appropriate statistical test. However, I want you to note this very importantly. Hypotheses typically are used in experiments. We are going to come there. By God's grace, I should be ending with research approach this evening so that we'll start with research design next time we meet. In research design, you will come to the understanding of different designs that can be used in researches, right? So one of these designs is experimental research designs, and hypotheses are typically used in experimental designs where you have the investigator or the researcher comparing between groups. This statement goes to help us understand that there are cases where you don't need hypothesis. So, research design, broadly, you have experimental research design and you have observational research design. For some kinds of observational research design, you necessarily do not need um, research hypothesis. Research questions or research objectives will suffice. But for every experimental design that you adopt for your research work, where you are comparing between groups, research hypothesis is needed. It is very important. Again, it's going to um, um, give you an understanding of the kind of direction that you should probably follow. For example, if you're checking just if it's a prevalence study, you want to know how many persons have, say, throat cancer. You're not comparing. So there is really no basis for research hypothesis. Your research objectives will do in that state, right? And if there is no research hypothesis, there would be no statistical tests, right? In that manner. So testing of hypothesis employs statistical procedures in which the investigator draws inference from the population about the population from the study sample. Yes, it's important that if you're comparing between groups, right, it's important to know that there are constraints when you carry out researches. One of the constraints is that you cannot, except in census where the total target population are the people you're working with. But if it's not census, you have the constraint of time, you have the constraint of money, right? You have the constraint of manpower. All of these would make you understand that you cannot work with everybody. You just work with a selected few. And when you do that, right, testing your hypothesis would help you come up with inferences about the population from that minute section of that population that you've drawn out to become your sample. So, for example, we are about say 17 on this call. So we're going to get there. I don't want to drop the gun, but then let's say after I did my sample size calculation, I'm supposed to work with 5%. Um, and from these 5 people, it assumed that whatever it is I'm doing with these 5 people, I should be able to infer what, depending on what my variable of interest is, depending on what my research is, whatever conclusion I'm able to arrive at with these 5 people should mirror what I will get if I had worked with the entire 17% on this call, right? And the use of research hypothesis in every research endeavor, right? It helps us state the direction that the study will go. Again, you don't start out a journey trying to find out the direction of the journey in between the road. These are preliminaries that should have been sorted out. That's why the first three aspects of the research process, we talked about research problem and research question. The next was literature review, and now we're talking about research hypothesis. All of these are preparatory works. They are the planning phase, where it helps you, this phase helps you understand what it is you want to do and the direction you're supposed to go, right? Okay, so my colleague in school, the masters I'm doing, reached out and wanted to know, wanted me to help out with the kind of study design he would use. When he stated the research title, his thesis title, I now asked him, I said, so what kind of study design are you hoping to use? He now told me a cross-sectional study design. I now start to unpack certain things and help him understand that you're checking for the effects, right? If you're checking for the effect, you cannot be using cross-sectional. Now, the reason being that if you had done the first three procedures very well, if you had understood what his research questions were, if you had understood what the research problem was, and if you had done his literature review very well, and he came up with his research hypothesis, it would have informed him on the next stage. You can see why we are saying that expect to still have a very solid and grounded research. That's why I'm advocating that if you missed the first two classes, please go back. And I believe Mr. Chris would make the recording available. Go back so that you can follow. It's in a train of thought. If you break the flow, you would probably just do damage to your knowledge of research. So it's important. It's important. The use of research hypothesis in every research endeavor, right, states the direction in which the study will go. And to eliminate redundancy, we already stated that there are some works that do not necessarily need research hypothesis, particularly observational study designs. They don't, particularly the descriptive parts, they don't need research hypothesis. Research objectives will do, right? And when you're writing, now this speaks to people who would be writing their thesis, your dissertation. To eliminate redundancy, standard practice recommend that you don't state both the research question and the research hypothesis. You choose one, right? Except now, this is a caveat, and I need you to listen. Except where your supervisor or it is stated in every institution as guidelines by which they expect students to report their thesis or dissertation, right? So it's important. But standard practice all over the world, you just choose one. You don't write both, because your research hypothesis is just building on your research question. And I need to know that your research hypotheses are stated in two forms. You have two types of research hypotheses. You have the null hypothesis and the alternative hypothesis. The null hypothesis is represented as H naught, H subscript 0, and the alternative rather is H subscript A. Now, for the research hypothesis, before I go on to define what the null hypothesis is, I want to confirm if you can hear me, please. If I'm still audible.
Yes, sir, you are
All right.
audible from my
Thank
end.
you. So, all right, thank you. So for the null hypothesis, don't forget we said hypothesis helps you at least from your hypothesis, you will know the direction, right, that your work is tending towards. Like it's an informed guess, like you have possible expectations that has built up or in your mind because of the literature review you've done, right? Now, one of the types of research hypothesis is the null hypothesis, which is some persons call it the traditional hypothesis. Like it represents the traditional approach of writing hypothesis. Here, the null hypothesis predicts that in the general population, there is no relationship or there is no difference that exists between the groups on the particular variable that you're working on. There is no relationship, no difference, right, that exists between the group that you're working on. And you already know that the alternative will now be that there is a relationship or there is a difference. Both are just mirror image of each other. So your null just predicts that, okay, so if I'm working with let's say you're trying to work on lung cancer and smoking and lung cancer. So your null hypothesis is somebody's mic is opened and I can hear this sound that is distorting us. Please, if you can, okay, Mr. Ojo, if you can kindly mute yourself, or I would ask that Mr. Chris help mute this person. All right, so back to the null hypothesis. So I was trying to give an example, right? You're trying to work on smoking and lung cancer. Your null hypothesis, which is the traditional way of writing hypothesis, is that there is no relationship between smoking and lung cancer. No relationship as well. Do you understand? Right? It is expected that at the end of your study, the null hypothesis is either rejected or you fail to reject it. So again, standard practice in the world of research methodology, you don't use the word accept. By the time you run your statistical analysis and you found out that you're not going to be rejecting the null hypothesis is actually what it is, right? The word you use is you fail to reject. In a way, you are saying you are accepting, but then in research methodology parlance, every field has its register, has its vocabulary. We don't use because I've run this statistical test and I'm going with the null hypothesis, that means I'm going to accept it. No, you fail to reject it. So you either reject it or you fail to reject it. I've spoken a bit about the alternative hypothesis. Here, you're going to be making a prediction about the expected outcome for the population of study. It suggests that there is a relationship or difference between groups on the variable you're measuring them for, right? And this relationship or this difference is stated in two ways. That's why you have two different types of the alternative hypothesis, right? It can be one directional or non-directional. The directional alternative hypothesis is also called one-tailed alternative hypothesis, while the non-directional is called two-tailed. You would see what I'm trying to say. So let's see this particular slide now. Please follow along. For the directional alternative hypothesis, also called one-tailed, right? It specifies the direction of the expected difference or relationship. We said in the null hypothesis, The null hypothesis, which is the traditional way of stating your hypothesis, is that there is no relationship, there is no difference, right? But then in the alternative, this is where you state that there is a difference or there is a relationship. But then there are two ways you can write this. There are two ways to state this. It's either you state it in the directional way or in the non-directional way. I earlier said the directional way is called the one-tailed. One-tailed because it's specifying just one direction. Now look at the example here. Patient who receive the new drug, let's say you're trying to work on a new drug, right? To lower blood pressure. Now, if you're stating your one-tailed alternative hypothesis, this is the way you state it. Patients who receive the new drug will have lower blood pressure than those who receive the placebo. You are trying to compare the effect of a new drug versus the placebo in reducing blood pressure. Now, when you're stating the one-tailed or the directional alternative hypothesis, note that the word lower as stated, it didn't just say patient who receive the new drug will have it has an effect on blood pressure. No, what effect is there? It lowers the blood pressure. Unlike the non-directional or the two-tailed alternative hypothesis, it does not specify the direction. Now, an example is that there is a difference in blood pressure between patients who receive the new drug and those who receive placebo. There is a difference, but to what degree did the blood pressure increase after taking the new drug or it reduced? So you can see why this is two-tailed. It's open. It's not tilting towards a particular direction. So that's why it is called two-tailed, because the difference could be higher or could be lower. But in one-tailed, you can see here that it was direct. The new drug will reduce blood pressure. Now, how do you develop research hypothesis? There are three principal ways. The first is to conduct a literature review. You can see why this class did not come before literature review. And Ms. Favor dealt with literature review very well during our last session, right? You will find it challenging to develop a testable research hypothesis, a specific and clear research hypothesis, if you've not done your literature review, because it is your literature review that would help you understand what is already known about the topic. From your literature review, you now go on to identify what your research questions are. Based on the literature review, you'll be able to pinpoint the specific research questions that will help you address your the research you're trying to carry out. Then you can now formulate your research hypothesis. Now, let's see this example. Now, after you conducted your literature review, you find out that there is a potential link between poor oral hygiene and heart disease. From all of the articles you read, the journals you searched, what your expected outcome would be is poor oral hygiene is associated with an increased risk of heart disease. Again, educated guess, informed guess, which you got from your literature review. So if you've not done your literature review well, you will not be able to come, because when we get to characteristics of hypothesis, you'll see why literature review is very important. So now you can see that these three fundamental steps helps you arrive at a testable, a specific and clear research hypothesis. Now, when you're writing research hypothesis, this is the way to write it. For the H naught, that's the null hypothesis, there is no relationship or there is no difference between usually your independent variable will come first before your dependent variable. Even if you don't understand what I just said, you would understand it as we go on. There is a lecture presentation on variables and scales of scales, level of measurement rather. You are going to understand. Then the alternative would be there is a relationship or difference between smoking and lung cancer. So if I may ask quickly, I need somebody to answer this question. This alternative hypothesis here, is it one-tailed or two-tailed? So let's say for the null hypothesis, there is no relationship between smoking and lung cancer. Now my alternative hypothesis is saying there is a relationship between smoking and lung cancer. This alternative hypothesis, is it one-tailed or two-tailed? Anybody can answer, please. Anybody, quickly. There is a relationship between smoking and lung cancer. What kind of alternative hypothesis is that? Is it one-tailed or two-tailed?
Um,
Say, I would say two-tailed because it's not specific, it's
Why?
vague. Because it's not specific, it
Thank you
doesn't
so
state.
much.
Yeah, thank you, sir.
The direction, yes, thank you. That shows we are following. It just tells us that there is a relationship. What kind of relationship is there? It didn't specify, right? That shows we are following. Thank you. So characteristics of research hypothesis, it must be clear and precise. It is important. It is important. If it's not clear, and the clarity and the precision is born out of your literature review. If you don't do, it's as if I'm going back to literature review. It is because if you boycott doing literature review properly, we're taught how to do a literature review. If you boycott it, you will have issues trying to come up with a very clear and precise hypothesis. The hypothesis should be clearly stated. It should not be vague. It should not be ambiguous, right? It would make it easy for you to understand and interpret, because by the time you do your statistical test, right, you're not just going to dump the result of the test on your supervisor, on your audience, as it were. You are going to interpret. If your research hypotheses were not clearly stated, you would have problems trying to interpret what your results were after you carried out the statistical test. So an example is high blood pressure increases the risk of stroke. It is very clear. It is not ambiguous. Then it must be testable. A research hypothesis must be testable through experimentation or observation, allowing for empirical validation or refutation. Because again, like I said, you either reject or you fail to reject. So if it's not, if your research hypothesis is not testable, in this world of AI, I know a lot of us use ChatGPT, Cloud AI, Gemini, all of those things very well. If it is, there was something Dr. Taiwo said, and I've held on to that word. He said that for you to be able to use artificial intelligence well, that means you already have some sort of intelligence to be able to manipulate the artificial intelligence tool you are even using. And that word is very sensitive. It's very, very, very profound for me, because you find out that some persons think the AI tool is out there to think for them, not knowing that you are the one that would instruct. That's why it's called artificial intelligence. It's not innate. You are the one that will train it to tell, okay, so this is what I want you to do. So people just think I can just load whatever AI tool is out there and it will generate all of these things. If it does, you will not be able to your research would not be, it will be disjointed, because you don't even understand what it is that the AI has generated for you. And I hope you know that that's the reason why there's something called prompt engineering. It is because these AI tools can malfunction. They can give you wrong results. And that's the reason why you need to know how to use them, right? So we're talking about another characteristic, which is it must be predictive. Yes, because it's telling you, it's like a guess. It's a proposition. It's a predictive statement, right? And it must also be simple and specific. I want us to run. The importance of research hypothesis. It provides direction to your study. You can't start something and not know the direction you're heading towards. It helps in selecting the research method. It aids in data analysis. All of this, we have future research lecture slides that speaks to this, right? So what do you think? What do you think? So this is me telling my fiance, will you marry me? And she told me, I reject the null hypothesis. Can somebody unmute and tell me what this means? Because look at me now, I'm dumbfounded. I'm like, what does this mean now? I don't understand. So
It
anybody
means
want to tell me what
yes.
this means? Gift, that was very swift. Have you been using that word before? That's on a lighter note. All right, that's the meaning. That's the meaning. Again, I said it. You don't use the word accept. You reject or you fail to reject. So at least I will take solace in the fact that she smiled. So even if I don't understand what it means, I'll just go ahead and slot the ring. All right. So that's um Gift has said it already. She means yes. There's supposed to be a break, but please. Oh, I'm seeing a question here. Am I proposing? Yes, but then I already have two sons, so that's to tell you that my proposal was accepted. If not, I wouldn't have come to the point where I have two sons now. All right, that would I like that. Thank you, enjoy. Okay, so it's supposed to be break time, but we cannot take that. We need to run. We need to run. But I hope you're following. So before we move into research approaches, um, do we understand? Let me quickly do a recap. So that will serve as our break time. I mentioned what research hypotheses are, right? And you need to be careful. There is the plural, there is the singular. The singular is as is as the ending part, while the plural as es as the ending, right? These are specific, clear, and testable propositions or predictive statements that guides, they tell you, show you the direction of your research endeavor. And we went on to talk about the two types, the null hypothesis, the alternative hypothesis. The null hypothesis just tells you that there is no difference or there is no relationship, while the alternative tells you that there is, right? But then, under the alternative hypothesis, you have two types of alternative hypothesis. You have the directional or one-tailed, or the non-directional or two-tailed. Two-tailed because it's not specifying the direction, while the directional is specifying the direction. And you need to know that in crafting your research hypothesis, you need to first conduct your literature review, two, come up with your research questions. Then number three, you'll be able to formulate your research question. Then you should know that the characteristics of research hypothesis must be specific and clear, it must be precise, it must be testable, it must be simple, right? That's more like an overview of what we just talked about. Let's quickly move on to research approach. Generally speaking, an approach is just a way of dealing with a situation or a problem. So if you're talking about research, it's important for you to understand that there are approaches to research. You cannot wake up. I remember the first time we were introduced to research methodology by Dr. Taiwo. I asked the question. I said, so what's the difference between the investigation that CIAs, police officers, FBI, the investigation they carry out and research methodology? Because it's a form of search, it's a form of inquiry too, right? It is this stringent, stepwise plan that makes research methodology very different from investigation, the investigation that policemen carry out. So if you're talking about research methodology, you cannot but talk about the approach. So how do I go about resolving or dealing with this research project I'm about to embark on? So a research approach is a plan or strategy that guides how a study is conducted. Now, in conducting this research, you're going to be talking about how you're going to collect your data, how you're going to interpret your data, and how you're going to analyze your data, and how you're going to interpret the data, so that your approach, right, at the very least, would help you, will capture all of this. it guides the conduct of the research. And in guiding, it means it would help you know, oh, okay, so this is the way I'm going to collect my data. This is the analysis I'm going to run, and these are the interpretations. It helps researchers systematically, not haphazardly, systematically investigate a research question or hypothesis. A starting point in trying to understand the collection of information for research purposes is the approach. And basically, there are two types. You either have the quantitative approach or the qualitative approach. Quantitative approach, qualitative approach, qualitative. You're talking, we're talking about quality, not count, not quantitative now. However, they would always tell you whatever has pros has cons, whatever has an advantage has an advantage. Now, it is because over time, and that's the beauty of science, right? How that nothing is static because of continuous work. We found out that okay, so we could actually come up with something called mixed method, so that we harness the pros of quantitative and the pros of qualitative. By that I mean the advantages of both, so that we can have a more studied, a more robust and grounded research work. Now, quantitative approach. Now, early forms of research originated in natural sciences. The likes of Albert Einstein, Michael Faraday, Isaac Newton, they were always finding something. They were always looking for something. That was where the early forms of research originated from. And what happened was they were involved in investigating things which could be observed and measured in some way. They were mostly dealing with counts, what could be counted. So this approach is known as the quantitative approach. However, for qualitative approach, this is Einstein. Einstein said something. He said, not everything that counts can be counted. Let's move on, please. I was talking about the quantitative research approach, how that early researchers started to use this approach because most of what they were doing revolved around counting what could be observed and measured. They were dealing with measurements, right? But then, as because science is not static, it's dynamic. Because knowledge is not static. They would always keep discovering new things. Now, Einstein rather said something. He said, "Not everything that counts can be counted. Everything that counts can be counted." And not everything that can be counted counts. So this is the bedrock upon which qualitative approach is resting. How that yes, we give kudos to the early researchers who found what the speed of light was, the force of gravity, all of these things. But then there are certain things that are also very important. But then they cannot be counted. They can't be counted. So that was what led. This is another approach to Lagos, right? And this kind of research approach is mainly used in fields such as physiology, sociology, and anthropology, basically the social sciences. That's where you use this kind of approach, as in naturally it readily speaks. This is the approach that readily speaks to them because they were dealing with human behaviors. And imagine, um say you're trying to count. Okay, so you're working with somebody who has, say, some irritations. How do you put counts on irritations? You can't say, tell me how many number of irritations you have with regards somebody is feeling irritated. It's a feeling. You can't just place count on it like that. In fact, the person will look at you twice like, okay, so how am I supposed to quantify this feeling, right? Or you want to say, what's give me a count to um I'm trying to look for another example. Um have you visited the dental clinic and you're trying to, okay, when some persons hear about going to visit, when you tell them that you're supposed to visit the dentist twice a year and those very important information, some persons have this phobia because they think for everybody who goes to visit the dentist is going. There is this myth to remove one tooth, get ready to remove all. And so you're not trying to work on phobia, you're trying to work on people's perception. Now, so how do you count perception? That's why that could say not everything that counts can be counted. Not everything that can be counted counts, right? Moving on. So basically, qualitative research approach is to increase our understanding of why things are happening the way they are happening. It addresses how attitudes are formed. Basically, you're not going to be able to um, use quantitative approach for every kind of research. No. Remember, I said everything that has an advantage has a disadvantage, and everything has a pros as cons. So um, it is against this backdrop that the mixed method has now been brought up, which sort of mix the quantitative with the qualitative method. And it recognizes the fact that there are limitations, obvious limitations, right? Like my thesis now, um, I'm trying to work on oral health literacy. I'm trying to assess oral health literacy among primary healthcare workers, right? And I am considering using a mixed method because my research questions borders on both approach. So I will be assessing their knowledge, their attitude, and their practice. But then I also want to understand the inhibitors, the barriers, right? That makes it difficult to integrate oral health care into primary health care. And if I'm going to do that and do that well, I can't use quantitative method. I would have to use qualitative. And I don't want to jump the gun. I'm just trying to use this as a side. I'm just bringing this up as a side note. If I'm going to do this, I would have to use some form of interview, in-depth interview, where they can really discuss at length. Oh, we've tried it before, but this happened. But if I make it rigid and want to force this last research objective into the quantitative way, I will not get the best from my respondents. So again, it just recognizes that there are limitations, right? And it engages their strength. Other names, if you're reading literature, if you're reading textbooks, you may come across these terms: convergence, integrated, combination. It's still talking about mixed method, right? So quickly, let's jump to a comparative analysis between these two. Let's just compare and contrast. So in qualitative, you're not using a probability-based sampling method while you're using it for quantitative, right? Because you are counting, because you are measuring in quantitative, it's just convenient to be able to use probability, right? So that you are going to get, like I was giving an example, we have 17%, right? And to be able to pull out a very good number that can represent the entire population, I need to use probability-based sampling method. Whereas for qualitative approach, you usually don't use the probability-based sampling the method. You have just as you have the probability-based sampling technique that can be used for quantitative, you also have the non-probability-based sampling technique that can be used for qualitative studies, right? Then um, you cannot generalize your studies, whereas in quantitative you can generalize your study. And the basis for this is that now, at the end of my sample size calculation, I've gotten a representative number that will mirror the entire population because I used a probability-based sampling method. And probability is just sort of, it helps you with it gives all the elements in your population equal chance of being recruited in your study. And because you did that, whatever it is you arrive at as your final sample size, the if it is thorough and you did it well, it should give you an hint into what is happening in the population. But because we necessarily do not use probability-based sampling technique in qualitative, you cannot now generalize your findings. For example, I told you about primary healthcare workers. So if I am working with primary healthcare workers, and I did, let's say, I had a focus group discussion with them, and they began to tell me a lot of things. It may not be the same thing I would get if I go to maybe Kwampam. So that way, I would not be able to generalize my findings. Then, if you use the qualitative approach, you are trying to answer why are things this way, right? And how are they like this, right? However, if it is the quantitative, you're trying to answer how many, where, when, like counts. In qualitative approach, the data is rich but time consuming. Imagine you run an interview with someone, and with that interview, the person is going to explain a whole lot. Unlike you bring a questionnaire, a validated questionnaire, a standardized questionnaire, and you give it to the person will just, oh, this, yes or no, yes, no, on the Likert scale, very difficult, neutral, all of those things. Those ones are not time consuming. But if it's imagine you recorded a 20-minute interview and you're not transcribing it, I'm very sure that you know that by the time you're transcribing it from audio to text, it will take you more than 20 minutes. That's where the time consumption is. It consumes more time, right? That's the reason why we don't work with a larger respondent. If you're doing qualitative study, you don't, because if you do that, you end up, I started by saying that there are constraints to every research endeavors. One of it is time. You find out that because in your proposal, particularly when you do your Gantt charts, where you propose the time frame for your study, your study is supposed to be situated in a time duration, right? But then if you use too many persons and you now use the qualitative approach, you find out that you may not be able to finish your study when you said you're going to finish it. But if you're looking at quantitative approach, data is more efficient, but then it may miss contextual details because now you are here with questionnaire. Now you're carrying, if it's an experiment, you're carrying some bit of experiment. But then qualitative, you're giving the person that avenue to explain a whole lot. That's why quantitative sort of may miss the contextual angle to whatever it is your variable is that you're measuring. Then the aim is complete, detailed, and is complete. Then detailed description. We've said that it's very detailed, but the aim is to classify the features, right, in the variables you're measuring, count them. Then if it's you could construct models. Data is in form of words, picture, objects, but then data in other quantitative, you're talking about numbers, statistics, right? But then in your qualitative approach, you have a rough idea of what it is you're looking for. But then that idea is not so solid because by the time you start to engage your respondent, there is a whole lot you'll be unpacking. Whereas in quantitative approach, you already know in advance what it is you're looking for by reason of your research, your literature search. You're able to come up with your hypothesis, which already has predicted the direction. Then in qualitative, you are the instrument as the researcher. But then in quantitative, you employ various tools. If it's experiment, you conduct, say maybe it's an animal study, you conduct experiment in animals. If it's a survey, you have your questionnaire. But in the qualitative, you are the one who would have this interview with people, right? Then I said it earlier, sample size is usually small, but you can have a large sample size, right, for quantitative approach. Then the sampling technique is concerned with seeking information about specific groups or subgroup. Again, you're still talking about a selected few because of the constraints of research, time, manpower, money. if you are using a qualitative approach and you have a lot of people, you would just you may end up not even finishing the study, right? Whereas under quantitative approach, sampling techniques seeks to demonstrate representativeness, right? So quickly, the choice of research approach is not done arbitrarily. It's not just done haphazardly. Again, research is systematic and scientific, right? So one of the cardinal points to note when choosing your research approach is there should be a match between the problem and approach. There should be a match. You don't you can't bring up um, a research problem that is qualitative in nature and you want to use a quantitative approach for it. No, no, no. That's why you see some persons after they spend time, money, resources, all of these things. At the end of the day, journals reject to publish their work because they didn't use the right approach. It's important. For example, if you're trying to conduct interview to explore patient experience with, I mentioned phobia, right? Dental anxiety, visiting the dental clinic. You cannot now want to force that kind of research problem. You want to force it into the quantitative mode. No, because you are trying to understand people's feeling. Okay, so why are you always afraid whenever you are asked to go to see the dentist? Whereas if you are trying to survey 100 patients to measure the effectiveness of, say, a new drug that has just been released, or say a new treatment, you can't also force that into the qualitative mode. The quantitative mode, you're surveying 100 patients to measure the effectiveness of, let's say they sort of just came up with a new vaccine, yeah, COVID-19 vaccine, and you're trying to measure the effectiveness of this vaccine. It's not going to be qualitative, it will be quantitative. So you must be well acquainted with your research problem, and you must ensure that your research problem has the most appropriate research approach. There are times when, yes, you may have a particular research problem that will go both ways. And even in that case, I usually would suggest that if it's in between the line, use the mixed method. Use the mixed method because it's important you get there. And it has to do with your audience. So that if you're presenting this before people who are more tuned to qualitative, they would have the qualitative side of it. If you have people who are also part of your audience who are more tuned to quantitative, they would also have that, right? Then personal experiences. Everyone, yes, we are now adopting mixed method, but then typically, naturally, or some years back, people who were in the social sciences, because of their background, they would always do things in the line of qualitative approaches. However, people who are in the natural sciences would always their tendencies is towards quantitative. So the researcher's own personal training and experience, right? It also affects his choice of approach. So, for example, somebody who is trained in natural sciences readily, most likely would want to do the quantitative research. Then your audience too, it's important. Your audience. So if you're trying to apply for a grant, right? Except where if it is clearly stated what they want, you don't collect grant and do otherwise. No, your audience also matters, right? So again, recall under research approaches, you have the qualitative part, you have the quantitative part, and you have the mixed method, right? And we just talked about the choice for the research approach. It's not done arbitrarily. You don't just do it. Okay, I think I like. No, there is nothing subjective in research methodology. It must be objective. There must be a reason. Just like I asked um, when I think it was Anjorin that answered a question earlier. I asked him why. Why are you saying it's two-tailed? Don't just say two-tailed because you like how it sounds to your hearing. No, there must be a justification. right? And this is it. You have the qualitative, the quantitative, and you have the mixed method. All right. Thank you for listening.
So, does anyone have any question or any comment for our speaker for today? All right, Gift, kindly unmute yourself and ask your question or your comment. Thank you.
Thank you very much, sir, for the presentation. Thank you, Johnson. I just need my question is about the two-tailed. If sir, please could you just give another example of it? It does the two-tailed non-directional hypothesis. I just want to have a better grasp of it because it's like still dangling. Thank you.
Sure.
Okay. I think I was able to follow, but it was breaking. But then I think you asked me to give an example of the two-tailed. Okay, so before I give an example, let me help you explain this again, so that when I give the example, you understand very well. Now, no relationship, no difference exists between variables. That's what the null hypothesis is saying, right? But then the alternate is saying that there is a relationship, right? Is assuming that there is a relationship or there is an effect, there is a difference between the variables of interest, right? For example, patients who use new toothpaste will have fewer cavities than patients who use, say, dongoyaro stick. This is an assumption, right? Nobody should crucify me because people who are addicted to using dongoyaro stick would want to come from my head. All right, let's just use that hypothesis. Patients who use new to like patients who use, let's say, Orabi, will have fewer cavities, right? But then after we mentioned the process of um, formulating your research hypothesis. The first is for you to conduct your literature review, and you have your research question. Then you'll be able to formulate your research hypothesis. So imagine that after you've done your literature review, you find out that so Aura B has some sort of effect. There's a relationship between um, 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 cavity and the use of Aura B. Now, the one-tailed will tell you what the direction is, what the effect of the direction is. The direction is rather in the sense that, okay, if I use Aura B, I would have lesser cavity. That's one thing. It's telling you specifically what the direction is, right? But then two-tailed do not tell me specifically. That's why it's called two-tailed. Like, okay, it could go either ways. It could be, it is when I started using Orabi. That was when I found out that I started developing cavities in my mouth, right? So let me use smoking and lung cancer that we already know about, right? So you did your literature review, found out that okay, um, there is some sort of relationship between smoking and lung cancer. One thing will tell you that patients who smoke has an increased risk of lung cancer. Whereas your two-tailed, that's one tail. Your two-tailed, your non-directional, meaning it does not give you the direction. We just tell you, yes, there is a relationship between smoking and lung cancer. So what's the relationship? Is it that people who smoking, the effect smoking has on lung cancer is that it reduces lung cancer, or it's a risk factor for lung cancer? I don't know if you understand this abridged and very quick explanation that I just gave. Gift, please let me know.
Yes, sir, I understand. Thank you very much, sir.
Okay. All right. So let me quickly say this. How you'd help yourself to remember all of these things, right, is Maybe before the next class, you want to quickly listen to the audios and start to begin to walk in the line of what has been covered, so that, oh, we talked about research question, research problem. Think of something, start to play on something, then walk it through this literature review. That thing you've thought about, that research problem and research question you've come up with, do a bit of research, literature search on it. Then now try to formulate research hypothesis based on it. Then now sort of check what kind of approach would best fit that thing. That's if you do it that way, you find out that it helps you understand more. Again, any fool can know. The goal is to understand. Thank you so much. Over to you, Mr. Titus.
Thank you so much for this insightful lesson. So